Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Vicepresident Insight, for pairing up with us and providing the possibility to create a win-win situation, hopefully, for everyone. My name is Oszkár, Roginer-Hofmeister. I work for EUROPEUM Institute for European Policy here in Prague. Thank you for my colleagues who are somewhere here hiding in the audience for helping us wrap it up all today. I would also like to introduce my colleagues, Miroslava Pisklová from the Slovak Foreign Policy Association, Dorka Takácsy from the Center for Euro-Atlantic Integration and Democracy from Budapest, and Magda Jakubowska from Publica Visegrad Insight, whom we have been working in the past roughly 1.5 years on a project which is titled Discussing Ukraine in V4 Mainstream Media, the Future Vis-à-vis European Integration. And now, as I hopefully gain your attention, I will sit down. Just a few practicalities about the project. The time frame was between June 2022, so when Ukraine gained the candidate status for the EU, and November 2023, when the Israel-Hamas war somehow sucked some of the attention away from this conflict. And as I said, we looked into V4 mainstream media, so in all V4 countries, about how Ukraine is presented, how the war is presented, with a special focus on Ukraine's future in the EU integration, EU enlargement of Ukraine. And this is one side of the coin, so we looked into the media narratives of the mainstream outlets, but we also organized focus group discussions in all 4 countries, so we could actually assess how these narratives are absorbed, assessed, criticized by the news audiences in the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. So the main question was how Ukraine's future is portrayed in these 4 media landscapes, with a special focus on EU integration, and how the corresponding news audiences are reacting to it. And I think the main takeaway was the difference between the projected and the received image, which is in some countries very minimal, for example, in the Czech Republic, and where it is a bit different. For example, in Slovakia, where this difference is tangible, or where the difference is minimal, but it's rooted in the disinformation landscape, which is spread mostly by the government, which is, for example, the example of Hungary. And I would also like to invite you to read the report, which will be out after this event. And I hope, since you will be able to read it, I mostly wanted to transform this into a discussion rather than for presentations. So for the beginning, let's start from the beginning actually. In the Czech Republic, Ukraine was not really part of the media discourse since the Euromaidan protests. There was a few relevant moments, for example, when Zelensky took office, but with the full-scale invasion, this changed dramatically, and this also escalated the disinformation scene in all 4 V4 member states. And I would like to maybe assess this difference in the 3 other countries. So what was, for example, so when the full-scale invasion in Ukraine started, what was the first reaction in Hungary, for example?
Well, probably the Hungarian case was an outlier for many reasons, and one of them was that we had parliamentary elections in 2022 April. So shortly, with only a couple of months of delay after the full-scale invasion started. which means that the topic was quickly picked up and put right in the center of the massive political discourse, and this has become one of the key campaign themes of US, basically. So the message they sold, the message they built the entire campaign on, was that Hungary has to stand out of this conflict. Basically, stakes are super high, it's better war, so we will be dragged in with their words they used, or we can stay out. But how they painted it, should they lose the elections, Hungary is inevitably getting somehow involved, and also has to, I mean, there was also a lot of disinformation spread by governmental talking heads and active governing politicians, which would have meant that Hungarians themselves would have had gone to battlefield and so on. So Hungarian field was very rich in disinformation too, very rich in fear-mongering, scaremongering, and mongering hatred. So eventually this was a highly emotional topic, and as a Hungarian saying said, even if you open the depth, this was coming out just like that.
And since there hasn't been any change in government in Hungary for 1.5 decades, and Fidesz is known for starting messaging and continuing the same message despite and regardless of everything. In Slovakia, it was quite different. In Slovakia, you had several governmental changes.
Three.
And I would be interested how these three approaches differed and how they tried to rewrite these narratives even retroactively.
Well, from the position of the Slovak government, as I mentioned, there has been 3 changes in the period that we focused on within the research. The support for Ukraine from the side of Slovakia, the official one, remained solid across all these governments. But of course, we have seen a very visible shift in the style of communicating the support to Ukraine and its vision of the future in the EU under the current Fico-Ford government. It's much less enthusiastic. It's trying to be smart in a way that we help Ukraine. But for example, with the military aid, we chose a way to do so that our business can prosper. Yeah, it's very visible that the narratives the current government representatives present at home to the home audience is much less supportive than the one we can see at the official meetings of leaders of the European Union or our ministers on the level of the European Union institutions. So that is a big change, and maybe from the point of view of the focus groups, when we started the discussion, I always try to look for some associations that people connected to a few of the topics I raised, and one of them was Ukraine and the support for Ukraine from Slovakia, and the emotion that people registered to have after the war started. And there has been a significant presence of sorrow, fear, and surprise from the side of the general citizenship.
According to a poll conducted by the STEM Research Institute in June this year, it is 18% in the Czech Republic who responded that they are not at all interested in the conflict in Ukraine. And this is interesting for several reasons, but when they were cross-stabbing these suggestions or these answers, these are more likely to be people who have strong opinions about the conflict, but are actively avoiding information about it. So, which means that if information about this comes up in the news, it is likely that they will be the ones who will change the channel. And I would be interested in the Polish perspective, for example. How is war fatigue or a disinterestedness in news on Ukraine and Ukraine's future manifested in Poland? Yes, amongst the viewers.
So I'll start with a little background, because this is important in the Polish context, because Ukraine is, we deal with Ukrainians coming to Poland, and we were very acceptive for the migrations, economic migrations. This is of course because of labor shortages. And so there were many Ukrainians present in Poland. The similarity of cultures and the languages was easy for them to integrate. And when the war, full-scale invasion started, Poland has received like altogether 2 million people, 1 million state, and so on and so forth. The coverage and this humanitarian aid that every single Pole gave to Ukrainians was absolutely magnificent, great, and we can only speak up in very good words about that. But we were leaving only with that. I mean, like the whole Poland and the commitment of every single person was there. Of course, the media coverage was full, 24 hours. You didn't discuss anything else than war, its development, and so on and so forth. So, and it took a few months of talking only about. I can't imagine if we have any switch in the government those days, because we were only completely devoted to the topic of war, to what's happening to people, and so on and so forth. So, but later on, as you mentioned, this kind of fatigue and this kind of understanding that we are in Poland, we cannot only talk about Ukraine, that there are also different other issues, and we have to come back to normality. Of course, it was faced by the media. People required more and more information on, and the topic was gone, but or maybe not gone, but partly gone. But in a good sense again. It wasn't not it didn't bring any pejorative thinking in the society. But later on, because of different economic reasons, starting with the labor force and kind of understanding that those people stay with us in Poland, they will of course do some part of jobs. It was easy to kind of fuel narratives that were very polarizing, and it happened, and this polarization and media publications started with giving a bit more hatred every time you read. It was growing and growing. I'm not saying that we reached any of the levels that the Hungarians had, but I think the very point where when the crisis on the border started with the grain and different food products that were transited through Poland, were very much used by the media that were not that pro-Ukrainian, or that their most of the job was to polarize societies, especially before the elections that we had last year. Then the narratives became more and more unfavorable. But still, Polish media is, you can hear in the society, you can read some comments on different media, but overall, what you get on the mainstream media is rather clear message that we are still into helping Ukraine, into helping Ukrainians, have like defense support for them, have economic and rebuild investments on the way, that we are way more open to having Ukraine sustained and win the war, and later at the next step be in the EU. Out of the analysis that we did, of focus groups, there are some feelings about how much Ukrainians take our jobs, husbands. Yes, that was quite a strong narrative that the beautiful ladies from Ukraine come and take away Polish guys. That was also one of the narratives, but I think that the real crisis with these economic questions was there. But at this very moment, I can't see it that much any longer. And this path for Ukraine to the EU, the future of Ukraine, is kind of understood, and it's a clear message. So there's no one is questioning that too much. Of course, if the rules of accepting Ukraine are similar to those we had in our accession, but there shouldn't be any shortcuts in Ukraine's accession. That's the key message.
This is also which is visible in the Czech case as well. So there's no fast tracking, there are no shortcuts. EU enlargement is not a goal; it's an outcome of reforms, and this is, I think, one of the good examples of how this was communicated, because this is exactly how the majority of respondents answered the question in the focus groups. So on the one hand, we had this type of communication, these narratives in mainstream media, and then you had the respondents say practically the same things. It is also interesting how Czechs said that that Ukrainians are very similar to Poles, to Slovaks, and they are having the same post-socialist heritage. However, Ukrainians were far longer in this post-socialist state, and this is why the path towards the EU will be longer, and they estimated and they agreed among themselves that this will probably occur around 25 years. So within one generation, at the passing of this generation, which is now starting this path. But what I wanted to touch upon is the elephant in the room you brought now in, with Ukrainians in the labor market, and I was hoping that someone will mention this, because there is a huge there is this elephant in the room, in the Czech room, in the Polish room, and in the Slovak room. Not much in the Hungarian one. One of the arguments is that yes, how much money they get through various aids programs, whatnot. But then again, there's not much discussion on how much they are contributing through taxes, which is actually far bigger than what they get in the end. And B, what will happen to these positions if all these Ukrainians leave at some point, if they leave. But a large proportion of them will probably leave at someday, yes. So my question would be, what is the situation in Poland? Is there a public discussion on this? And if so, how much is it outside the think tank EU or local governance bubbles?
It's more on this regional or local governmental levels. There is a talk. I'm not purely economist, so I won't give you the numbers now, how it looks. But Polish society is quite used to Ukrainians working with them. As said, there were already long ago, we also had specific programs for Ukrainians and Belarusians to easily obtain the work permissions, visas, and so on to work in Poland. We need that labor force, and I think that many of the entrepreneurs, producers, and so on and so forth in Poland are aware of that. I think that even during the biggest wave of a migration crisis, when the war started, we also accommodated and accumulated all the labor force that appeared in the market with those newcomers. And as said, that would be around 1 million people. Let's say half of them needed work because there were kids, of course, and some women didn't work. There's been this discussion about the benefits. Poland quickly, I mean, like on the wave of this humanitarian help, we immediately opened all the benefits for Poland. For Ukrainians, we have this 500, it's now 800 plus program where every family on every child gets this 800 zloty a month. And this is what the Ukrainian mothers received as well. And there were some issues with this program and with absorbing those funds. And it was quite clear that many of the mothers go back to Ukraine, but still didn't sign up to get that money. And that wasn't, and many of the journalists raised it because, and Polish society felt it's absolutely unfair. But at this very moment, we already have this loophole quite safely sealed. So you have to be in Poland, and your kid has to go to school or any other care places to receive that money. So there was this immediate response from the government. So there's no longer a thing to build on. So I'm not worried. We can use all the hands for work. So I said I don't bring you the numbers, but they are absorbed. They pay taxes mostly, but yes, I think that the biggest was with what they bring with themselves and how much, because many of the Ukrainians, of course, came with a capital. Of course, they withdraw it from Ukraine because of the unstable market and started, for example, buying flats in Poland or any other immobilities. And that, of course, was very good for the market at that very moment. But the prices also grew. And it's as much as, of course, flats were very expensive in Poland, now they are twice more expensive because the growth was really hard. And this is what Ukrainians are blamed for, but this is not that visible in the media, to be honest.
Slovakia is similar to Poland and the Czech Republic, a traditional labor market for the Ukrainian labor force for decades, and I'm interested in the same question, whether to which extent is this part of public discussion there, these two instances, especially the second one, if they leave.
Yes, well, we have definitely seen a wave in media and also in wider public debate on Ukrainians and how to actually get them integrated in Slovakia, whether it was labor market, whether it was schools, whether it was accommodation and so on. We have had some packages that helped with support. We've had a big wave of fundraisers and help that went bottom up from the citizens. You could bring clothes, you could bring whatever you didn't need at home. This was very visible after the war started, all across Slovakia. I would say, I'm not going to give you an exact date now, but I would say a few months after this process has started and the integration of Ukrainians started in Slovakia, we have seen a wave of articles also on disinformation media and spread by disinformation active actors, trying to polarize the society and spreading the narratives on Ukrainians exactly taking our jobs or taking our money through the financial benefits and so on. But I don't see it being a big issue right now in society. It doesn't really ring a bell at the moment, even though in one of the focus groups, I think it was 3 people who commented on helping Ukrainians in Slovakia, when resident in Slovakia, a bit negatively. It was about Ukrainians arriving on big pricey cars, taking our money, getting support for accommodation or apartment that Slovak didn't get from the state, and this was an issue. But it was like 2 or 3 people out of 15 that we've had in the 2 focus groups. It was not a lot. And generally majority of people that we talked to during the focus group discussions was very supportive of helping Ukrainians. They mainly talked about helping them at home, like on the territory of Ukraine, but they were also open to help mostly mothers and kids coming to Slovakia. I don't really see this being a big dividing issue at the moment in Slovakia.
Thank you.
The cost factor was also used in Poland, but in our focus groups we could tell that if there is some narrative like this appearing in one participant, the rest pick it up, but they very fast leave it alone, and it just doesn't sell in Poland that much. I mean, we are all aware of some issues because there will be issues, and obviously but it kind of doesn't go much further. You can meet those narratives, but they are not that exploited.
And it's also the question of how the social media goes into this or ties into this disinformation thing.
Sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to add one more thing. The refugee topic was not really that present in the focus group discussions. All the participants mostly focused more generally on humanitarian aid and big no to military aid provided to Ukraine and Ukrainians, but not really on the refugees. But definitely, as you started on the social media, this is a big factor in Slovakia. On top of governmental representatives and many politicians across the spectrum there being super spreaders actually of some disinformation and pro-Russian propaganda in Slovakia towards the general public, we do have a pretty wide and capable network of not only disinformation media as such, but also of many Facebook groups and social media actors that present the pro-Russian propaganda and anti-Ukrainian narratives to Slovaks. And I have also experienced this in the focus group discussions when we talked a little bit with the first group where we had some extra time left at the end. I was asking the participants on the sources they use. And even though this group was consisted of the younger part of those we worked with, between 35 and 50, I think, years old, there has been, they mostly claim that they are trying to compare the sources, different media, but some of the participants said that the main source is friends and Facebook groups. So that was interesting.
Yes, and it's also indicative that, for example, Fico is one of the rare politicians in the V4 who has a Telegram channel, which means that also he has an audience there. But unfortunately, this is a huge topic, and I would like to have a separate discussion on this. But as we started a bit later, I would maybe extend 5 minutes to tackle one of the most divisive topics of what we encountered in the research, as that is the image of Zelensky, which is unprecedentedly different in all 4 countries. In the Czech case, he is portrayed mostly as a wartime president in his green attire. He is also in the streets among soldiers, but he is also a diplomat capable of negotiating on various platforms. It was also a good platform for him to appear on the rotating the rotating presidency, the Czech presidency of the council. It was also very interesting to have him as a talking point on the European political community. So you can have him, his visibility increased on all possible channels. But this was always positive and always supporting the support for Ukraine narrative. But this is not the case everywhere. And I'm looking now at Hungary.
Guess that I'm going to come. So in Hungary it was fundamentally different. And one of the reasons was, as I mentioned, that basically even Zelensky's persona has become a center political topic. So for instance, when in the above-mentioned 2022 parliamentary election, which yes has won yet again with the landslide, and Viktor Orbán went on stage to hold his speech of victory, he named the enemies he won over, and Zelensky was one of them. And basically,
okay. He probably measured it somewhere, and it fit the picture.
Absolutely, and so this was the starting point, I guess. And what we have seen in the monetary media, that the monitoring period was quite long, over 1.5 years. We have seen that Zelensky's image has undergone certain changes. So at the beginning, he was rather played out and portrayed as a clown, as a puppet, as a puppet without will, without his own political will, without even any political skills. However, he has been increasingly painted as an evil dictator who himself provoked the war, who intends to erupt World War III even. So from the image of having a clown, just an actor on stage, he has increasingly been termed and transformed in the propaganda into a really malicious, malign actor.
And what is interesting in Hungarian media is that they cite politicians such as Lukashenko, for example, without any context. It's amazing. And now maybe to ask the same question in Slovakia also, because there's the difference there precisely because of social media, that there is one projected image by the public broadcaster and mainstream media in general, and there's a different image which is projected by social media, which immensely influences how Zelensky is perceived in Slovakia.
Yes, definitely. So, as you mentioned, the Slovak mainstream media rather present President Zelensky similarly as what you described for the Czech case, so strong, capable leader, strong drive for reforms that will get it into the EU and NATO over time, recognized and respected among Western democratic leaders, and very active fighting for Ukraine and its future. On the other hand, the discussion with the participants in the focus groups showed that there was the change, the perception of President Zelensky was the largest that we've seen in the four narratives that we identified for the Slovak case. No one from both groups perceived President Zelensky in any way positive. They called it similarly to what was the first part of Hungarian portrayal as a puppet. If they specified, it was always puppet in the arms of the West or the US, directly, specifically. He was degraded as a comedian, several participants mentioned this. They recognized, actually, that he is active on the global sphere, that he is attending all the forums and meetings with leaders, but they also understood this in a negative connotation. They said he is too active, and he should rather be at home and focus on helping his people instead of flying around the world for meetings and fancy events. And yes, and they definitely, the participants portrayed President Zelensky as the one who is responsible for actually prolonging the war because of asking for military aid, because of actually fighting, having soldiers on the front lines, instead of trying and looking for a peaceful solution to the conflict. That's what at least the audience thought.
Unfortunately, this is all the time we had. Unfortunately, this is the sad conclusion we have to end with very little optimism. But then, okay, then one positive sentence from Poland.
From Poland, I mean, Zelensky is not portrayed this way. But in the beginning, when he took over power, but before the war, there was some, you know, his former career was what it was, right? So Poland wasn't sure what to think about that. But nowadays, he's a hero.
Okay, so let's end on this positive note. Thank you all for being here. Please read the report, which will be online soon, and I invite you to join me in a round of applause for our participants.